Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner Health. I'm one of your hosts, Leslie Gadet, and I just want to wish all of those here, for those of you here in Canada, happy Canada Day, happy birthday, Canada. I'm excited to get into today's topic. Before I get started, let me introduce myself. Let us introduce who we are so that you know who is coming at you live today. So my name is Leslie Gadet, and I'm a mindset and emotional awareness coach for mission-driven women. Yes, for women who are on a mission to change their world. And I help them to come to the mindset they really don't have to choose a specific path that everyone else is telling them to, but they can actually design their life their way. And I show them through mindset work, emotional awareness work, and just using their time well, that they can really get a lot more done and really start building and living a dream life. So over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Leslie. I love your introduction every time. It excites me every time I hear it.
Thank you.
I'm Andy. I'm the unconditional coach, as you can see. I help people with boundaries. I help people with unconditionally accepting themselves and those in their lives. And I help people feel options, feel empowered through options. And that's one of the primary components of our conversation today is empowerment. We talked about empowerment last week in that empowerment gives choices. So today we're gonna evolve that conversation to talking about children and how we can empower our children. And it's an interesting conversation, and I'm excited to get into it. There's a lot to say on this subject. I'm kind of excited to hear what you're going to have to say on the subject too.
Yeah, I'm excited because this is something I've been talking to you about behind the scenes for quite some time about
Yeah.
how kids are really important. I feel like as the generation that I've been put into this box, the baby boomers generation. So I was born just at the end of before it became a different generation. I guess they call them, is it Gen Xers or something like that? I don't know. But I know that I'm in a specific generation where we're called the baby boomers, and I really truly feel like I want to start making a difference in how I show up in the world and being able to influence the young people around me in a really positive way, but not just by what I do and say, but helping them to shape their own lives and to do
Right.
that for themselves, right? And empowering them to make empowered choices for themselves. So yeah,
Right.
I'm excited.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the point of the conversation, right? We wanted to talk about how do we empower children rather than how do we just make them do what we want or what we think is right. Um, there has been between your generation and your parents' generation and my generation and the younger generations now, between us and them, there's been a major shift in parenting, in the parenting styles, in the parenting suggestions. And there's been kind of a confusion as to what's the point of it all. Like, what are we actually trying to do? There's a lot of people have been calling the younger generation snowflakes and you know making fun of them and judging them in all kinds of negative ways for the kinds of things that they want and the kinds of ways that they grew up. And I think there's a lot of confusion as to where that came from and what the point of it all was. And that's kind of the conversation I wanted to get into is what does empowering our children look like? And right now, for this particular conversation, we are talking about like kids, like actually preteen children, from toddlers on up to the teenage years. We're going to have future conversations about teenagers, but this one is more about the children and how do we empower them while we're still, while they're still kids, while they're still, little and learning, and we still have to teach them and they're still looking for our guidance. How do we empower them rather than just forcing them to do what we want? A lot of our parents had that more of a, do what I say, not what I do kind of a mentality, or, children are meant to be seen and not heard kind of mentality. Um, we and the generations after us didn't have as much of that mentality, and each generation had less and less of it. Now kids are almost, a lot of us older generation think that kids are almost more powerful than the parents. They have more authority than the parents do in a lot of cases. At least that's the way that a lot of our generation sees that. So what does empowering our children look like? Because giving them all the power isn't correct or isn't good, because they need to be taught. We need to guide them. So how do we do that? What does that actually look like? Does it mean that we're supposed to be doing what we want them to do? Like, are we supposed to have the relationships we want them to have? Are we supposed to have the careers we want them to have? Does it mean that we're supposed to teach directly by example? Because if that's the case, then no kid would ever grow up being in technology, because our parents and their parents never were in technology. Kids would never grow up doing the new cool jobs that didn't exist when we were kids. Right? So, and kids would never grow up having relationships that we didn't know how to have. So what is empowering our children? What does teach by example actually mean? If it doesn't mean have the career that we want them to have, or if it doesn't mean have the relationship we want them to have, what does it actually mean? How do we teach them by example?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think a lot of stuff came out for me as you were speaking, and I'm not a mom, but I truly, like I said, kids are really important to me, and I know that the kids are our future. And of course, every generation says that the
Yeah.
children, the people behind us are our future. Kids are our future. But for me, I even truly believe it even goes back as far as when they are first learning to crawl and first learning to like touch and see and feel and taste and smell.
Yes.
And then making those decisions on like, oh, am I going to stand up? Am I going to walk? Am I going to climb on that? Am I going to touch that? Am I going to eat that? Those types of things. For me, specifically, because of I am not a parent and I am consciously aware that kids are our future. For me, empowering children is having a voice where I can say, look, this is the lifestyle I lead. It's a choice I made, and I went against the grain of what my generation before that, like what I was taught, what I was, and really, what I saw modeled wasn't necessarily the lifestyle that I wanted to lead. I always was
Right.
one that was adventurous and looking to the future and looking to see what else I could do. I wasn't necessarily having the bravery at first to step outside and do it. It took me actually getting married in my early 30s to actually start then looking outside of living in a different country, going on the road, eventually now living the lifestyle that I'm living now. But for me, it's really about if I had children of my own, what I would want to do is when I ask the question or someone asks the question, I know my son or daughter is thinking about the answer. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they have an answer that lights them up and you can see it. I want to explore that with them. To me, that's empowering them to start thinking about what their life could look like and letting them know it's okay, that they can make these choices. So for me, empowering kids comes from having those conversations where if they say they want to do something, okay, well, let's look at that. What does that look like? What does that mean to you? Allowing them to think for themselves, not necessarily to do it on their own, but walking with them and saying, oh, this is really what you want? Well, let's look at this together. Right. And that to me is, if I was a parent, how I would probably be parenting my own kids.
Right. And I do have two children who are grown up now, and that is essentially what we did. Exactly what you're talking about. As our kids grew up, we did, ask them, what is it you want to do? Not just what do you want to be when you grow up, but what do you want to do right now? Like, what do you want to be tomorrow? What do you want to be in a year? What do you want to be today? Let's do that. And sometimes it was, Dad, I just want to hide in my room and be by myself. Dad, I just want to shut myself off from the world because it's hard right now. So we would help them do that. We would give them a quiet, peaceful place, safe place in their bedroom and let them stay there for a day or a week or whatever it was. At the same time, we would also make it safe for them to come out of there whenever they wanted to, even if they'd chosen to stay in the room. If they said, Dad, I want to be safe and I want to be by myself, we would let them, and we would still make it safe for them to come out whenever they wanted to, even if they still wanted to go right back to the room again. If they wanted to, if my son and my daughter each, one of them liked to read, one of them liked to write. The one who liked to read hated writing, and the one who liked to write hated reading. So we let them explore that, right? The one who liked to read was reading some pretty hefty books like The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers that are written in French and translated. When they're translated, at least in Canada, they're left a lot in French. The child who liked to read was reading those books at 7, 8, 9 years old, and they're 1,500 pages of really difficult concepts. So, that was really great stuff. Mind you, my other child was also writing complicated plots and stories by the time that person was, around 8, 9, 10 years old, and creating, intricate stories and intricate make-believe situations. So we explored those with them. Not just what do you want to be when you grow up, but what do you like doing right now? And we helped them develop those skills, those things that they liked, and didn't make them focus on the things they weren't good at. I mean, we helped them cover over the things they needed to have as a minimum part of their education. We helped them learn those things that they needed to have, but we didn't make them learn the things that were beyond that. The person who liked to write read comics. The one who liked to read, we made them write. When the assignment was to write an essay, we said, look, write a paragraph and we'll help you. We assisted them to get the grades they needed to get in those things they weren't good at. And we let them excel at the things that they were good at. So now as adults, they're both doing what they really, really love, even though they didn't know what it was when they were 7. Even when they were 13, they didn't know what it was that they wanted to do. So that we helped them figure out what it is to do what they actually liked right now, and how, and which allowed them, which empowered them really to figure out what that means in the grander scheme of things. Now, we didn't do it right. We didn't do everything perfectly. My daughter still grew up wanting to go to university because she felt like she didn't get enough education as a child. But that was more of a judgment that was coming from a lot of her peers rather than what she actually thought of herself. So, even though we tried to empower our children, we still made mistakes. And it's not about doing it right every time. Empowerment isn't about always knowing the right thing to do. Empowerment is about giving them the choices. And that's what we tried to do, give them choices. Now, when they're children, you can't let everything be a choice. You can't choose to not go to school. You can't choose to not take your punishment, right? You can't choose to do whatever you want, eat ice cream 17 times a day. You can't choose to do that. But empowerment means giving them real choices. Like, would you rather have a PBJ or would you rather have a bowl of cereal? That's a real choice, right? And not, would you rather have your broccoli or a timeout for 3 days? That's not a real choice, right? Give them a choice of 2 things that they might actually want. That's what empowerment looks like. And because we did that with our children, they grew up making choices in a lot of cases that we don't agree with. However, we love them and support them in those choices because that's how we've raised them. And that's what I believe empowerment looks like to me for children.
Yeah. Well, I love what you actually touched on something that was really, I wanted to just comment on for a second, was giving them the choices, like real choices of things that they would like. And I liked that because it wasn't, you were actually giving them a choice, because you can get the choice of, like you were saying, you do this, eat your broccoli, or you have a timeout. Well, one of them is really, one they don't like, maybe they don't like broccoli. And the other one is punishment. So, but they can look at both as a form of punishment. So what you were in essence saying, do you want this punishment or do you want this punishment? Now, I
Right.
know vegetables are good for you, but again, it's, as kids, I think your kids grow up to be more well-rounded when you do give them the choice that the reason why I want you to do this, like this is the reason. Like for my brothers and I, my two younger brothers, we grew up loving every vegetable you could think of. We were eating them. I mean,
Yep.
my mom would have tomatoes in the refrigerator and we'd be like cutting them in half, putting salt on them and eating them. I remember eating a whole head of lettuce. We'd eat carrots. My mom would always have celery. We would put like cheese whiz on it or peanut butter.
Yep.
But we were always into the vegetables because it wasn't about that you have to eat them. It was about having the choice, having choices to things to choose from. And I think that is what made all the difference. I'm not choosing a punishment. I'm which is the lesser evil to me, because in that instance, your kid might even say, I'll just take the time out because I refuse to eat broccoli, right?
Right.
But they're still being punished. And so that to me isn't really empowering them. But on the flip side, there has to be specific disciplines in place. It's not about just, everything is your way or no way. They've got to learn. It's just important because unfortunately, we do not live in a world where it's just really super easy and everybody, treats everybody humanely and kindly and animals kindly and the planet kindly. It's just, it is just a world where we do still have to raise our kids to be consciously aware of their environment, like being as what I grew up learning it as street smarts, right? Not just having and I think that's unfortunate, but then, excuse me, it's still important. We still have to teach them that. So empowering their kids doesn't mean that you're not still teaching them and guiding them, and also if you have to discipline them, that's still a positive way to empower your kids, because when they learn, for an example, for me, I was disrespectful to my mom. And I remember, I think I was around 13 or 14 years old. And a friend of mine who had moved away was coming for the weekend to see all of us. And because I had disrespected her, I was given a timeout. I could not go outside that day. She knew my friend was coming, but I was basically grounded for the day.
Yep.
That was my first and only time to be grounded, by the way. But it was a lesson I learned. It stuck. And I realized, oh, okay, being disrespectful to other people is not okay, and especially to your parents. And so it was just a lesson. So again, we're empowering me to learn the choice that there are consequences to my behavior is a good lesson, I believe. That's still empowering me to grow up to be a better human being. But I just wanted to bring that.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that too. Another part of empowering is, and I like that you were talking about, sometimes there is punishment, sometimes there is, consequences. They are children. We are still trying to teach them. So we it's not that we don't give them consequences. It's that we give them consequences that are appropriate to what they've done. And another way to empower them is we could also give them a choice in the punishment. Instead of saying eat your broccoli or have her time out, because ones we think good and ones we think bad, but they might think of them both as bad. Instead of doing that and giving them a fake choice, give them a real choice in that you can eat your broccoli or you can eat lettuce. Okay, well, you don't want to do either one of those. Here's an option of a couple of punishments. You can have a timeout, or you can stand in the corner for, half an hour or whatever. Like you can give them the choice. You can empower them. You can empower them even in the choices, or even in the punishments. As long as you say you can have this punishment or that punishment, you can have this discipline or that discipline, you can have this choice or that choice, as long as they're equal in choice. Like I was saying, the option of a peanut butter and jam sandwich or a bowl of cereal, that's a choice. But so is the option between a timeout and standing in the corner. Right? They're still choices. They're equal in scope to the child. The child's still going to see one as both choices as either a good thing or both choices as a bad thing. and they're going to know what the intention of those choices are. Whereas the idea of eat your broccoli or do a timeout, that seems confusing to the child because they know you want them to eat the broccoli. So, but to them, it's a bad thing. So it seems confusing to them. So when you're how you empower children is you give them choices that are relevant to each other, choices that seem the same to the child, that don't seem necessarily the same to an adult brain, but seem the same to a children's brain. And this is one of the things that some parents have difficulty with is being able to see things from a child's point of view. So part of empowering our children is to be able to see what they're seeing, see the world through their eyes. And quite honestly, that can be difficult because their eyes change on a day-to-day basis. They're growing and evolving and changing at tremendous rates, at a speed that we don't even remember doing because we grew so fast. So as adults, it's important to remember that they are changing, their points of views are changing, and that if we want to empower them, it's about figuring out where they're at right now, where they're at emotionally, mentally, and what actually looks like a choice to them, and give them a choice in that realm, what feels like a choice. Empowerment, as we talked about last week, is about choices, is about options. Let's give our children options. And we still need to teach them. So it's not always about, do you want to do the good thing or do you want to do the bad thing? No, it's about, here's the good things I think you can do. Here's the good things that I can give you options to do. And here's the bad things that I can give you options for when you don't do the good things I want you to do. Right? We gave our kids choices between reading and writing. They had to do something language arts, English related. But they had the choice between reading and writing. They didn't have to do strong in both. They had to do a bit of both. They had to do a minimum level of both. But they didn't have to be strong in both. So we gave them the choices. And when they didn't do their homework, they still had a choice of punishments. Right? So they still had options. That was the point of empowering them, is to give them options. Okay, this is the option of homework you got to do, and this is the option of punishment you're going to have when you don't do your homework. So, and again, we didn't do it always right. We didn't always give them options. We didn't always, do what we intended to do. But we are parents. We're people. We make mistakes also. But that was what felt like empowering to us, and it made a difference in how they approached us. It made a difference in how they respected us. It made a difference in how they treated their friends and how they grew up with their peers. And I'm quite proud of how my children grew up. And I think that this is one of the secrets we could offer other children as we are raising future generations.
Yeah, I love that, because then you're also teaching your kids that if they decide to have a family of their own, that they've now got some skill sets that they've learned along the way from how you and your wife had raised them. So I think that's really powerful. One of the things I really like too is helping them to, I think part of why there's a lot of people who are unhappy in specific areas is because they focus a lot on their weaknesses, and instead of like focusing on their strengths and getting help with their weaknesses. And
Right.
So, and it's not necessarily a weakness. It's just like whatever's not your strong suit. Like if you're a better writer than you are at, I don't know, making a digital copy of something for someone, and you're a better copywriter than you are at doing like some kind of artwork for a cover. Well, but you are asked to do both because it's for something that you're learning to do. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to excel at what you're good at. And if you are empowered or given encouragement, you're going to choose to get help with the other. Even an example of people who just do things business, like even young people who do business, they, one of my nephews had taken, I think it was like chemistry or something, some kind of like specific to, I can't think it's chemistry, but it was something to do with, I don't know what he was doing in school. Here in New Brunswick. And he decided to take the course in French. This was a few years ago. And it was like, okay, you didn't need to really necessarily take that course that program in French because you would be most likely speaking with a lot of people who were in the English community if this was the career path you were going. It didn't mean that you grew for when you're like your French, but it just meant that make it easier for yourself because French is an extremely difficult language, and to actually try to then on top of that learn a trade or whatever that is in French made it even that more difficult. So he actually ended up stepping away from it and doing something else because it was really difficult.
Right.
So for me, I think it's like, okay, well, where do you excel? Do this. Where do you need help? Ask. Where are you not as gifted for yourself? Like your strength isn't there. Ask for help. There's nothing wrong with that. So, and in the sense, getting back to my nephew, he's by marriage, by the way. It was instead of doing this, let's empower him. Give him the idea that listen, you can do something still in this area. What do you want? Letting him think about it. What do I want? And then making the choice of going after what he wanted. But I think it's just really like when you start with kids, I think it's really important to start, even as I was saying in the beginning, from the baby stage, because you are encouraging them to explore. And to actually become bold and to become brave and to become, more curious and decide what it is that they want to do and whatever that looks like. And if it's a strength, then you encourage that. If it's something that they're not as good at, I just like what you had said, that you really took the time to say, look, if you have to write an entire project, let's start with chapter 1 or paragraph 1 and we'll work from there. And I loved that. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks.
Yeah. And the part that I want to accent with what you said there is on the parts that aren't your strengths, get help. Not help to make them strengths, not help to learn them better, not help to become good at those things. Just help to get through what I got to get through so I can go on to the next thing. Right? Help doesn't mean I want to learn it because I already have this strength over here I'm going to focus on. I just have to have this as a part of my academic training. So get help to get through the academic training so that you can focus on what you're good at. And as we get further into high school and then into college and university, we get to choose more and more of the things we're actually strong at. So when we're younger, there is a certain minimum skills that we have to learn how to have. And it's about giving us options as to how to learn those skills. Even when you go back to, like you were saying before, learning how to walk. With our children, we could have given them the option. We gave them the option of crawling up on the furniture, getting up on the coffee table and up on the couch and standing up and learning how to walk away from that. But we also gave them the option of doing that with a stroller in the mall. So they would get up on the back of the stroller, they'd climb on the back of the stroller, and they would hold on to the back of the stroller as we pushed it forward slowly, and they learned how to walk that way. So, and one kid preferred to climb up on the furniture to learn how to walk, and the other kid preferred to follow the stroller around the mall to learn how to walk. So, again, it's about having options. It's about learning different ways of doing things, right? So guess what? One of them's a mall rat and the other one's not. Now that they're adults, one of them likes to hang out in the mall and one of them doesn't. Surprise, right? So it is about having those options, about learning different ways that we can get through to our children and giving them what they're looking for. And that's what empowerment looks like. So I wanted to also touch on the concept of culture, because culture is one of those things that we talk a lot about, but a lot of people don't really know where it comes from. We talk about culture as in our roots, what culture did we come from? What are we doing here? Here in North America, we talk about the Aboriginal cultures, the native cultures, as some might call it. We talk about other people's cultures. We don't often look into our own cultures as white people. We look at the non-white people as having culture, but we don't necessarily look at our culture as white people. So what does it mean to have culture, and why do we care about that with our children? Like, what are we doing with our children, and what can we do to empower them when it comes to culture? What does that look like? How can we make that something they care about? And should we? Why should we? Should we even do that? Is that important? And that's another conversation I wanted to talk about, because although teaching our children is important, sometimes what we teach them depends on where we came from and where they're coming from. So that's another conversation I wanted to have. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, and it's, you're right, when it comes to what we do, how we interact in our own lives around different experiences, what we are, how we're responding to something can have effect on our children. I truly believe that there are, the experiences that we have of our own, that shape our beliefs. The experiences that we have watching how other people respond to things can shape our beliefs. And I truly believe that generational things that can get passed down and cultural things can get passed down can shape our beliefs. And so when you bring culture into it, and especially when you're in Canada or the States, and you've got this multicultural, melting pot style of living, where you've got everybody from all over the world living together. And then you start seeing people not only coming from other places and, settling into North America, but then you start seeing that different cultures are now getting together. And so for me, it's like showing how, like I said, I'm a baby boomer. So how do I interact with people who are different than I am?
Mm-hmm.
Because I come from a mixed race family. Like, my dad is Black and my mom is white. So all of that background on both sides is, they had their own beliefs based on their own experiences. Again, generationally, just that alone is completely different than what I wanted. I wanted to have a choice.
Right.
And I kind of broke out on my own and just decided that I could make the choice. Right. Not necessarily did because I was raised by my mom. She didn't always agree in the beginning, because for her generation had specific beliefs and expectations. And I did not want to be put into that box.
Right.
And so, when it comes to culture, then when I see all of, different people that are from all different places in the world, they all have their different beliefs. They all have their different, I guess, things that they do, the things that they eat, the way that they act, the things that they believe. They bring it all here. And I think in the beginning, when it's like first generation, like that comes here from somewhere else, so they're just the landing generation, the immigrant generation, and then they have the firstborn generation. That's where I think the culture question becomes even more relevant, because now their kids are being born into North America, where it's like, this is the way things are done here. Like, there's the way of life is not the way of the old country where my immigrant grandparents or my immigrant parents are from. Right. This is like different. So how do we teach and lead by example, especially if you're not originally born and raised here in North America, learning about Western culture from living it? Right. And for me, I think when it comes to that, it's just being open. I think that is just the only thing I can suggest, is just being open to the possibilities of your kids being able to like embody maybe some of what you can teach them. But then empowerment to me is, how can I empower my culture here and make it an acceptable, make people like accept it and want to learn about it, and I want to be curious about it and embody it and embrace it. And that's through, I think, empowering the kids to just be themselves And if they choose that they like what mom and dad or grandpa and grandma or whatever that is, their culture, their beliefs, and they want to like bring that out and adopt it as part of what they are doing, then you can also like empower them there. Like it's still empowering choices through your culture and allowing that maybe your culture becomes a brand new culture because it's now become from where you were from, and you've got a firstborn or a secondborn generation who's now grown up in the Western culture, and the two are now married. How can we then like empower that as a new beginning? Because we've talked about this offline.
We have a lot. Yeah. This is a conversation you and I have had very, very often. And I agree. And it is about giving choices. It is about, offering options. And a lot of times when we talk about culture, we talk about places, people coming from other places in the world and coming to North America. But one of the conversations we don't often have is the culture that's already here. Like, we have a culture. North America has a culture. As a matter of fact, Canada has a somewhat different culture than the States has. As we've mentioned a couple of times now, Canada's more of a melting or more of a multicultural, as in we try and honor different cultures in different ways. And the States is more of a melting pot in that they try and kind of amalgamate everything into one, conglomerate culture. At the same time, they're not that different in that we're still joining a variety of different cultures, whether it's those that are here or were here, or whether it's those that are coming here from somewhere else. And empowering that is about giving our kids options. When our kids go to school as little kids, kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2, and they see kids doing things that they're not familiar with, or they talk about Santa Claus or Halloween, and they're talking to kids that have never heard of those things. Or they're talking about Passover, or they're talking about something else that they're not familiar with. We can empower them by helping them find an interest in things that aren't their own, so that they can decide whether or not they like those things or they like our things. Because then we get to show them the benefits of our culture, of where they come from, why we chose our culture, why we want them to choose our culture, and give them the choice as to whether or not they choose it or not. And what's going to happen then is, most of the time, if they do feel empowered, what they're going to do is they're going to take the choices of the cultures that they're given, and they're going to choose the ones they like, they're going to discard the ones they don't like, and they're going to create entirely new cultures. And this is what's been happening both in Canada and in the States. And quite honestly, I believe it's happening all over the world. And just in case some of you think that we are corrupting our cultures, all you have to do is look all through history, anywhere in history, and this has always happened. The Romans didn't have one culture for 1,000 years. It evolved. Day after day, year after year, century after century, it evolved. The Greeks, the same thing. The Europeans, the South Americans, the Africans, the Asians, like all of the different cultures that we look at, they were not one culture. They never have been. We never have been. We've been evolving. Language has evolved. Culture has evolved. Traditions have evolved. Religion has evolved. Faith has evolved. They've all been changing on almost a daily basis. We just don't remember them because we look back on the Greeks and the Romans and we lumped them into one box. But I promise, if you were living there, they didn't all lump in the same box. All you have to do is look back at actually reading some of the stories and actually listening to some of the facts that we have discovered, and they're not all in the same box. So this idea of culture changing and evolving has always happened, and it's always started with our kids. It's always started with the children growing up and saying, I don't like that my dad beats my mom. I don't like that my mom doesn't see herself as a human being. I don't like that my dad feels like he has to go work in the fields because he's not allowed to go build horseshoes for a living. I don't like that there is some guy that tells my parents where they're allowed to live. Kids grow up seeing those things and going, I want to change that. And that's where kids create culture. And they learn these things as we're teaching them as kids, or when they're kids. This is how we can empower them, is we can show them the choices that we have, the choices that they have, and we can help them see that there are some choices even we don't know they have. I come from this culture. You come from that culture. I don't know the choices you have. I didn't know that was an option, but my kids are being exposed to that through your kids. So let's help them choose. Let's help them see the choices that they have. And then let's help them make those choices so that they can have the future that looks more like what they want their future to look like, rather than what I think their future has to look like. Again, it's the same empowerment through culture as it is when we're raising them through education or through any other aspect of our lives. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just being okay with letting your kids decide. I think it's scary because, well, a lot of parents, I think there's this whole, I believe, they don't want other people to look at them a certain way. They don't want other people to like say something about their family. And so I believe that if a parent can just right from the very get-go, just let their kids, still guide them and show them, lead by example, lead the life that you hope is positive as an influence for your kids to see that you are not just only telling them what to do and don't do what I say, but don't do what I do, is not a very good motto to have, because then all your kids are going to think or see is that there's rules for them, but not for you. And as soon as they get old enough to make their own decisions, what are they going to start doing? They're going to start rule breaking, because now I'm an adult and I don't have to listen to you anymore.
Right.
Whereas if you could just say, look, I'm going to lead by example. I'm open to sharing with you if you have questions about something. I think that was one of the things I really loved about my mom growing up, was that I could talk to her about anything.
Yeah.
She invited that. But and I think it's just, again, our kids up to a specific point, they're already those formative years. I think it's all the way up to 10, 11, 12. Those years are extremely important, because from there they've already learned how to make decisions. They've already learned how to have opinions and make whatever their beliefs are. Whether you've given them as a belief, whether they've decided something is going to mean whatever it means to them, but those years are so important, because from there, that's where all their decision making going forward in their life is going to come from. And if you can empower them to say, hey, guess what? You're making decisions for this part of your life. Now let's go all the way through. Oh, you're in this year, and we're going to get to that later in our series. But you're going to talk to them about, okay, you're here, but now we're going to empower you to go here. Let's talk about what you had decided here. Does it still apply? Right. Let's take you all. To me, that is a really good way to have a way to influence, to encourage, to empower them every step of the journey, so that they're not like people, growing up in our generation, especially in mine, where I hear a lot of people saying, well, I didn't really have those choices, or I don't feel like I'm worthy and deserving because I grew up with this, and this, or without. And my parents never talked to me, or my parents always thought that kids were to be seen, not heard, or, whatever those things were. And if you just embrace it from the beginning, it's not about raising, I guess I never heard this term. I guess I'll have to do some research around it, but I never knew kids were now being called, the new generations being called snowflakes. But to me, it's like I want to really encourage kids from the very youngest of age, so that they grow up healthy human beings and make this world a better place.
Yeah.
And that to me is important.
Right. And that's exactly it. It's about empowering kids to make the world a better place. And the question there is, what does a better place look like?
Mm-hmm.
Like, am I or you the 50 or 60-year-old person the right have the right definition of what a better place looks like? Or does the 10-year-old have a better definition of what a better place looks like? Because I promise you, their definition of a better place is different than mine. But so who's got the right answer? And the truth of the matter is, at some point, you and I aren't going to be here, and they are.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, their truth of what a better world looks like is going to win out. And
Yes.
whether I like that or not has no relevance. Whether I accept that or not has no relevance. Eventually, my opinion's gonna go away with me. Now, I can try and enforce that upon the younger generations, and many people do, but all that does is breed resentment and make them turn away even more. So this is where empowering comes from. This is where empowering through culture. This is where empowering our kids to do what they think is right. And not just in an educational or personal sense, but in a cultural, in a world, in a global sense. When I'm 6, do I want to hang out with the kid who doesn't go to the same church that I go to, or who doesn't go to church at all? Do I want to hang out with the kid whose family doesn't celebrate Christmas? Do I want to hang out with the kid who wears different clothing or celebrates different holidays than I do? When I'm 6, I don't care about those things.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm 6, I just want to play with somebody else who knows how to play in the sand. And guess what? They all know how to play in the sand. Right?
Yeah,
They all know how to swing on the swings.
exactly. Because we've had this conversation way back when we first started, that if you put two kids in a playground that are different from one another, as long as they have an interest to play, that's all that matters. They don't have a problem with, oh, you're dressed in, you don't look like you're dressed in great clothes, or your skin color is different than mine, or you speak differently than I do. It's like, you like to do that, I like to do that. Let's go play. That's it. The only time that becomes an issue is when somebody externally, some external influence says, that kid is different. Why are you playing with that kid? And so and so how do we change this through our kids, right? Because
That's the
that's
easy
where it
question.
happens.
That's the easy question. Sorry, the easy answer to that question. How we change that in their kids? Get the hell out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't need to. They're already doing the change. That's what kids do. So this is what empowering children looks like. Just stay out of the way. Now, the question that comes up is, how do we keep our culture and empower them? Like, how do we keep our background? Mm-hmm. And that question comes from a place of fear, because so many cultures have been wiped out because some master culture decided they didn't like these other cultures. This has happened to Black people. This has happened to our Native communities. This has happened to brown people. This has happened to many different kinds of cultures, because white people decided we were superior. So how do you keep your culture? Just get out of the way, because the kids will decide which parts of their cultures they like. A 6-year-old kid's not going to say you're going to the wrong church. And a 6-year-old kid's not going to say you have the wrong beliefs. You're believing in the wrong holidays. They're going to be curious. And what I know is, we don't lose culture by letting it evolve. We create culture that way. Mm-hmm. We lose culture by forcing our way upon somebody else. That's how we lose culture. When we as white people forced other cultures to lose their culture, we also lost ours. We don't know our history. We don't know our roots. We don't know where we came from. Most of us don't even know what our European roots were. So we lost just as much culture as those we took culture from. So what does it mean? How do we empower each other to keep our cultures? How do we keep our backgrounds? How do we keep our roots? How do we know where we came from? Get the hell out of the way. Let the kids choose. Let the kids, and not just not just let them choose, but encourage them to choose. Oh, this kid celebrates different holidays. Well, do you want to go and see what their holidays look like? I mean, I'm at work, so maybe I can't, or I have this other thing I got to do, so maybe I can't. Maybe you can go with their kids, their family, or maybe our family will join their family, or maybe their family will join our family on our holidays. Like let's collaborate. Let's find a way to give our kids choices and give them options. Empowerment, as we've mentioned, is through options, is through choices. So let's give our kids those choices. And what I promise you will happen is we will have cultures come from that will better this world, that will make everything into something that is so much better than anything we could have ever imagined. Because kids have huge imaginations, and almost all kids have huge capacities to love. And you mix those two things, and incredible stuff comes from that. So just open it up. Let the kids do what they want within reason. Obviously, they can't be hurting other people, but give them choices, give them options. We can teach them what our culture is, but we don't have to teach them that our culture is the only good one.
Yeah.
We can teach them Santa Claus and Halloween and Christmas and Easter and the Easter Bunny, and and we can teach them Jesus Christ or whatever the culture, the faith, the background that you want to hold on to. We can teach them that. Just don't teach them that it's the only thing that they're allowed to have. Because if you do that, then everybody who's different than them is the bad guy. And that's what causes strife in our cultures. So that's how we can empower our children. And that's what I would hope we can do culturally, is empower our kids to create, to take, to amalgamate, to accept, whether we're Canadian and we want a melting pot of a bunch of different cultures, or whether we're American and we want not a melting pot. We're American, we want a melting pot. We're Canadian, we want the multicultural of a bunch of different cultures. Or we're American and we want to amalgamate everything into one culture. Our children have the power and authority to do that way more than we ever could. They have the ability, the love, the creativity, the imagination to do that in a way we never could. So let's stop getting in their way. Let's give them that option. And it starts when they're little, when they're walking, when they're crawling, when they're learning to eat food. And it goes all the way through the rest of their lives. Let's start when they're little.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think too, when I was younger, I was a little girl. I never knew that I was different.
Right.
That's so funny because like I said, my mom is white, my dad is black, but I never knew that I was different from my mom. She's my mom, you know? And the same with my two younger brothers. Like I didn't know that it was different the way my mom didn't look like us. I just thought that was just the way it is. Until I started getting older, and it's like, oh, that's how obviously then you learn the birds and the bees type thing. And you understand, oh, okay. But as a little kid, again, when external influences have the potential to change the way a child thinks and sees the world. And if we can just allow them to empower them to choose how they see the world on their own through their experiences, asking questions along the way, guiding them, allowing them to decide, have a decision like, okay, what does this mean to you? And let them decide from there what it's going to, like how they're going to show up going through life. And I think with, again, little kids going back to the playground, I just you put a bunch of kids on the playground and they all look different. There's a playground just down around the corner from where I'm staying right now. And I see a ton of kids. Do you know what I saw? Brown kids, black kids, white kids, Chinese kids. And you know what they were all doing? Running around, laughing and playing and screaming and yelling and chasing each other, having fun. There was no, oh my gosh, your skin is dark. Oh, I can't play with you. Oh, you look different. You have different shape features and I can't play with you. Oh, the way you're dressed, I can't play with you. What you do or how you speak, I can't play with you. No, it was like they were laughing and giggling and chasing each other and having the best time. So if we can empower that mentality of just being able to go through life, enjoying life, and getting curious around life and doing it together, allowing our kids to empower them to do it together,
Yes.
regardless of how they look, how they sound, what their background is, what their social status is, allowing them to just do it together, but empowering them that we're here to guide you as we've gone and we've taken the road ahead. And I'm willing to tell you what my experiences are. So if maybe you have the same experience, I can give you an idea of how I got through it. But I can also learn from them. And that's something I really love, is that I've been able to just really accept that the younger generation can always teach.
Yes.
Even the littlest ones, even the little ones, like, again, the playground, that scene that I've seen a couple of days this past week. It's like, yeah, there is no difference. It's only what everyone else who's grown up and had life experiences and been jaded that looks at that and says there's something wrong with this picture. Whereas they're like, if they could speak from experience from that age, they would say, what are you talking about?
Right. Exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
And what I learned from a baby recently, this is a funny one. What I learned from a baby recently, I saw a video on Facebook of a baby dipping his foot into the ice cream cone and eating his ice cream with his foot. So what I've learned is you don't need hands to eat ice cream.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
Right?
Life is, when you're a kid, it's like, it feels like life
wonder.
is just fun. And you're getting curious about, what can I do? What can I see? Being outside, like, for us growing up, our generation, I know we would leave it, like, especially on the weekend, we'd be out playing all day long. We'd eat breakfast, we'd go out and play until lunch, come back home for lunch, and then go back out in the afternoon. And if we left the area where we lived, pretty much our parents had no idea where we were the whole day till we came home. We had a set time to be home for supper, and that was it. You can't do that today, unfortunately. And maybe that wasn't the, I don't know what changed, but maybe we can have a conversation around that someday.
It's easy to understand what changed. There's been another alert that's gone out recently in this neck of the woods about another child gone missing, and they don't know where that child is, and she's been gone for a few days now. So that's what changed. When kids go out of their neighborhoods, their parents don't know if they're going to come home again. That's what changed. But anyway, that's a different thing. When we're talking about culture, when we're talking about changing, when we're talking about evolution, when we're talking about empowering our kids, it is about choices. It is about giving them options, whether it's culturally, whether it's academically, whether it's emotionally, relationship-wise, whatever it is. It's about giving them options, and real options that compare to each other, not options, this good thing or that bad thing. Not options that, seem like we're trying to manipulate them, but actually things that they will equally want. This punishment or that punishment. This good thing or this thing that you like or that thing that you like. This thing that you're curious about or that thing that you're curious about. Whatever the emotion is that they have to those things. They might have a stronger one toward one or the other, but you don't know that. And that's the point of giving them choices. And quite honestly, those things change on a moment-to-moment basis for kids.
Yeah.
So that's what empowerment looks like.
Yeah, and just so you know, like, for those of you who are listening, one of the things that it became apparent to me, obviously, as I've been older, and I'm sure it was obviously when I was young, but the kids can see, like, when you're not being truthful, and they can actually see when they're being manipulated. They can see it. Not necessarily can they always control the outcome, but they can see when there's manipulation going on. And so again, the whole reason why we're talking about empowering, especially from that young age, those formative years, is really because you want your kids to grow up where they're not rebelling against you. I mean, you want them to have choices and be curious, and maybe they won't follow the same footsteps as your expectation is for them. But that's part of, like, giving them choice. But they could see if you're trying to manipulate them, and you don't want it's avoiding the resentment piece is why I believe it's better to empower our kids to have choice.
Yes.
And so that they learn respect. I think I can now look back. Before, obviously, I couldn't, and they might not at the time when you're doing this, but now I can look back, where my mom had me come in at a specific time every day, as a young girl, and my younger brothers had different times, like they were able to come out a little bit a little bit later. And I realized this. It was because I was a girl and she was looking out for me. But then I was like, why is this happening? I'm the eldest. This isn't fair. But I can look back now. The choice is still about being a parent, is still making sure that you are guiding your kids. But it's also, let's do the journey together. Like, do the journey together. Show them what it looks like to do it together, so they grow up not being confused and not, and we're going to get into that more as we go through this series. I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing.
Yeah. Future conversations are going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about the next series, or the next stage of life, the teenage years. And we're probably going to do more than one conversation on that one because there's a lot to cover. Thank you for joining us on this conversation. If you like what we're having to say, please let us know. We're trying new things. We're experimenting with new conversations. We're covering things that we've talked about, as we mentioned, personally, just between the two of us off camera, a lot. So we're now covering things that we haven't covered on this channel before, and we'd like you to give us your thoughts. What do you think? Obviously, like the video if you like it. Subscribe if you want to hear more of what we're doing. If you want to be on our journey, experience what we're experiencing, and share this around and let us know what your thoughts are. Thank you for watching, and I love that you're on this journey with us.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure, Andy. I mean, I think we could have gone on a little longer. I think we can really maybe even come back, or even, take a piece of this and take it into the next generation that we're going to dive into and have a conversation. But yeah, this was fun. I enjoyed this. It's really something that I've been thinking a lot about. Kids are important. And I think now is the time to start talking about right from the get-go, when we're growing up and how we're learning, and that way we can empower our future generations. So on that note, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here. As Andy said, like if you liked, subscribe so you don't miss out on future conversations, and share it around to your friends so we can grow the channel, but also just so that they can get on the conversation and maybe even give us some ideas of what they'd like to hear more of. So on that note, I hope you have a great rest of your Friday. For those of you in Canada, happy Canada Day. Happy birthday.
Yay, happy Canada Day.
Yeah. And then for those of you who are in the USA, I just want to wish you a happy July 4th Independence Day on Monday. I hope you have a fabulous weekend with your family, your friends. Enjoy, celebrate, enjoy life, connect, and don't be closed off to learning about life, because it will enrich you more. So on that note, I'm gonna let you go, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
See you next week, everybody. Bye-bye.